Hi, it's Verity here and welcome to my channel Pretty Little Button, where I make paper crafting tutorials for the everyday crafter. Today I'm taking part in the Altenew February Stamp and Die release, and I have a watercolouring card for you today with a simple trick for those that struggle with watercolouring. Do you want to know that simple trick? Heat embossing. It's a great way of being able to colour in your images and stay within the lines. So today's card features the Fresh Cut Roses stamp set from Altenew. This is an outline stamp set, and there are two lovely big florals in this stamp set, and I'm going to be using the one on the top. In addition, there's also so many lovely sentiments in this stamp set, a lot of them centred around wedding day, and they're really beautiful, where you've got a lovely script sentiment as well as a nice standard strong font. Now, Altenew do include some leaflets inside, which does show you different ways of using the stamp set to give you some ideas and inspiration to get going. But today I am just going to use the largest floral stamp and colour this in with my Altenew 36 watercolour pan set. So I've placed a piece of smooth Archer's hot press watercolour cardstock into my MISTI, and I'm just positioning the largest floral over the piece of card off to one side. I want the floral coming in from one corner, and then I'm using my magnets just to keep the watercolour cardstock in place. Now, because I'm going to be heat embossing this and it's quite a large stamp and there's so much detail, I'd really want to ensure I get a really good impression, and I'm just coating the paper with my anti-static powder just to prevent any of my finger marks straying over. Now, I am inking the stamp up with some embossing ink, and I'm making sure I'm going all over because this is a quite nice detailed outline stamp. I want to make sure that I get all of that stamped down beautifully. Just really pressing over, making sure I get a good impression so I know all my embossing powder is going to pick up that beautiful stamp. So I'm just covering this with some gold metallic embossing powder and just covering all over to get a good impression. Then using my heat tool to heat set the embossing powder. And of course, it never tires when you melt embossing powder and just see it turn it into that beautiful gold metallic colour. So as I said, this is a great way of watercolouring an image if you're not great at staying within the lines. The embossing powder creates kind of like a well for where you want to put your watercolour, and it'll stay within that to some degree. Obviously, if you completely flood it, it will go over to the next little well of where you've got embossing powder. But if you don't flood it too much, you can prevent bleeding between colours. So I was just selecting some brushes to use, and I selected quite small ones because there's some really fine and delicate spaces within the rose that you need to get into. So you do need a smallish paintbrush, and I'm just using a round brush. Now, to begin with, I'm just wetting with some clear water the area that I want to add the colour into before I actually drop the colour in. So this is going to be a wet on wet technique. And I'm just now dropping in some Cosmic Berry watercolour from the 36-pound watercolour set. And I'm just adding this at the base of the petal. So your darkest areas of the petal are always going to be towards the base, where there is shading and where there's shadowing. And anywhere that anything overlaps, so where a petal overlaps another petal, you are going to get some shading underneath. I'm then going in with the clean water just to draw some of that Cosmic Berry out further and just to smooth the blend out. Now, as it's a wet on wet technique, this will work itself as well, so it will start to soften and blend. And you can go back in and add more layers and darken up the areas, which is what I'm doing. Just going in and adding some more darker shades just to get that definition and interest. Now, I repeat this for all the flowers because, as I said, there is the embossing powder. You don't necessarily have to go to petals that are on the opposite side of the flower. If you were doing like a no-line watering colouring technique, you would need to do that to prevent your colours bleeding. You'd want the petal to dry before you colour in the petal next to it. But because of the embossing powders, you can easily colour the next petal, as long as you don't, as I say, flood that well and the water spills over. Just as of note, I also coloured the leaves in the same manner, adding a lighter shade and then going in with a darker shade. For the leaves, I did use Forest Glades and Evergreen for the colours. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn some music on and allow you to watch this watercolouring. I have sped it up quite a bit. If you don't want to watch all the watercolouring, then just skip to the 11.5-minute marker, and I will then show you how I created the background to this card. Okay, so to create the background, I've added a slight blue hue around the florals by just adding some water around the edges and then going in with some blues. So I started off going in with Ocean Waves, which is a lovely soft blue. I've also added in some dusk and some Persian blue as well. And this is just giving that hint of a blue sky behind the floral. Although this is really great, I wanted to add a little bit more interest to the background and to the card, just to add a bit more drama and interest to it. I often get inspired by a lot of the Altenew team. I love some of Erin's videos where she adds sort of like water, droplets and paint drips to her backgrounds. So I'm just doing that here with the colours that I use in the background as well. So again, using Dusk, Persian Blue and the Ocean Waves. And I'm just making sure I've got plenty of the paint, quite a lot of water within the little paint pan, and then I'm making sure I'm loading up my brush with quite a lot of paint on the end of it, so that when I add it to the card, there's quite a lot of paint on there. I'm then just lifting the card upwards to allow gravity to take effect, so that the paint drips down the card. At times, I'm also helping this out by then just going in with some extra clear water and dripping that over the top of that, or I'm using clear water to directly paint down the card first, and then I will add the colour to drip onto it again as well. And I'm just doing this, as I say, just to add a little bit more interest and variation to the background. To add a little bit more interest, I'm going to add a heat emboss sentiment from the stamp set. This just says, "Congratulations on your wedding day," and I did heat emboss this onto some black cardstock. And I also wanted to go in and add a little bit more interest to that background. So I'm using the Altenew Jet Black ink spray, and I'm just covering up the flowers with some scrap paper, just because I don't want to get any of the splatter actually on the flowers. And then I'm just adding some black paint splatter to the background. I hope you enjoyed today's card and really enjoyed it, and I hope it will make you take up some watercolouring with simple heat embossing. I've got a couple more cards over on the blog for you, and if you're interested, why not head over to the blog where you can hop along and see more inspiration as part of the February Altenew Stamp and Die release. If you're new here, I would love it if you could subscribe to my channel. Just hit that bell icon to be notified when my next video is up. And down below, what's your simple trick for watercolouring? I'd love to know. Until next time, happy crafting!